everyone, welcome back to Intentional Youth Ministry. So honored to have you with us today. In this episode, I want to talk to you a little bit about the idea of creating culture. Creating culture. Now, if you've been in youth ministry for any amount of time, you probably have dealt with this very issue and probably found it to be quite a challenge to create culture. For some of you, maybe you're new in youth ministry and you're in that point now where you're trying to build culture and create what the culture of your student ministry is going to look like for the future. And so I want to give you guys a couple of thoughts on that, if I could, just some really practical, hopefully, advice that will help you when it comes to creating culture. I see way too often in church world, we try something new, we implement something new, fresh vision we feel like we've gotten from God for our ministry, and we try it, but then, a month in or 2 months in, we throw the towel in because, man, nobody's engaging, or it's not working, or it's not giving us the results that we thought it would, and so we kind of just quit and we move on to the next thing. I want to encourage you guys with this. Please don't do that, because you will never, ever create culture in your student ministry. You really won't if you quit every time or you quit on initiatives and programs and things just when it gets a little bit harder, when you're not seeing the results you want to see. So how do you really create that culture then? How do you build that? And so I would just encourage you, really a lot of it boils down to your willingness as the leader to own it, to really dig your heels in and say, hey, this is who we are. This is what we're going to do. This is a part of our culture. This is who we are, and it's not going anywhere. I think back to years ago when I first had the idea to implement small groups in the context of our middle school ministry. To be honest with you guys, it was quite a challenge because middle school, especially, they don't drive, they're relying on their parents, and it was a challenge. And in the beginning, I remember, I'd host a small group for middle school guys at my house, man, and I'd get so bummed because like 2 or 3 guys would show up, and I would go, man, if I can't even lead a group and get more than 2 or 3 guys to show up, how am I ever going to create a culture of this and having volunteer leaders lead groups? I don't understand how I'm going to do this. But for me, I knew that it was something that God wanted us to do. It was very much a part of our culture and DNA as a church to be involved in community and in groups and relationship. And so we just kind of stuck to it. And I just said, no, hey, we're going to keep doing small groups. And if 2 guys show up, then we're going to do it with the 2 guys that show up. And we just kept creating the culture. We kept doing it. And we just kept saying, hey, we're about this. And we offer small groups and we talked about them. And as a result of that, what ended up happening over time, guys, was what was really difficult at the beginning grew into something pretty awesome. And we had multiple small groups happening throughout the week with various adult volunteer leaders leading them. We even got to a point where we were on, I think, 12 or 13 middle school campuses doing on-campus small groups as well. And so we really saw the culture just blossom and blow up into something really cool. But that would have never happened if we had just quit when it got difficult. And so I just encourage you with that. So when there's something that you feel like, hey, God has called us to do this. This is a new initiative. It's a new program. It's something that we want to be about as a student ministry. Then just go for it, man. And don't quit when it gets difficult, but just keep communicating vision, keep casting vision, and then just keep doing it. I would encourage you with this, a really practical thing you can do as well. At the end of the year, I would always sit down with my core team of leaders. In the early years, that was volunteers. In the latter years, it was staff. But we would sit down and we would look at everything we have done in the calendar year, every program, every event, every initiative. And we'd really say, hey, okay, does this line up with the vision? Did we see the results we wanted to see? Were students engaging in this? Did it accomplish, did it do good in that sense? And then we would say, do we want to keep it or do we cut it? And honestly, a big piece of that for us was we said, you know what? There are times when we try new things and we want to give it a shot and we say, hey, it's not working, and we cut it. That's okay. I'm not discouraging you from doing that. But there are times when you say, hey, that number one, the box is checked. Like, we know this is a God thing. God told us to do this. It lines up with the vision of the house. We want to be a church or a youth ministry that is about fill in the blanks. It could be small groups for you. It could be missions. It could be student leadership, whatever that is for you. And if you feel like God has really given that to you, even if it's struggling, don't just say, hey, let's just throw in the towel. Let's just cut this. But maybe you could think through with your team of ways to maybe rebrand something or repackage something, or maybe put a fresh approach or a fresh spin on something that you've done in the past, but you know that God's called you to do and that you really want to be a part of as a student ministry. Maybe you just need to repackage something or rebrand something that you're doing. But I encourage you, biggest thing you can do is just to stick it out. Don't quit. I remember years ago, another one was when we decided to launch a middle school worship team. And can I just tell you, it was tough at the beginning. It was actually brutal at the beginning. But now years later, I've seen the fruit of that. I've seen the students who started out in sixth grade, coming in, who could barely play guitar, who could barely sing on pitch, who now are worship leaders and worship pastors and, playing on our main stage at my church here or on staff at other churches. And that would have never happened if we had just quit and given up. You have to create the culture, and creating the culture means you stick with it. I think about missions. When we first started doing youth missions, it was a struggle. Come on, some of y'all know what I'm talking about. I remember the first time I tried to take students out of the country, man, like it was crazy. Like parents, every year I felt like I was, when I started out, I was 20 years old, I was single. And I remember having to try to convince parents why it's okay and it's safe to let your kid come with me on a missions trip. And, they're gonna be able to raise the money, and I promise you. And it was always, I felt like I was trying to sell kids to go on missions trips. And it was always a challenge, and it was always a struggle. And, those first few years, we would just take a few students on missions trips. And, after the first international trip, when a student lost their passport, I almost threw the towel in. But I said, no, missions is a part of who we are. I want our student ministry to be about something bigger than themselves. And so we just kept chipping away at missions. And I can tell you that years later, we got to the point where even to this day, we'll take a couple of hundred students, middle school and high school age students, on missions every year. But it all started, that culture came as a result of just spending the time and investing and continuing to just stick with it. And so I'd encourage you, the greatest key to creating culture, guys, is just to stick with it. As the leader, make a decision. Hey, this is who we are. This is what we're going to do, and stick with it, and you'll see the fruit from that. Hope that encourages you guys. Hope it blesses you. We will see you on the next episode of Intentional Youth Ministry. Take care.